On March 31st, 1922, 6 people lay dead on a remote Bavarian farm, and no one was ever convicted. The Hinterkaifeck isn't just any farm. It sits isolated in the foothills of Bavaria, miles from neighbors, accessible only by a narrow path that winds through dense forest. And in the early 1920s, it became the site of one of Germany's most brutal unsolved massacres. What makes this case different, what separates it from countless other rural murders, is what happened before the bodies were found. Strange events, whispers, warnings that went unheeded. Andreas Gruber was the patriarch, 63 years old, respected in the village of Wernersberg, though not particularly liked. In 1921, roughly a year before the murders, Andreas began telling neighbors something disturbing. He'd found a newspaper on his property. Not unusual, you might think, but this newspaper had belonged to a woman who'd gone missing months earlier. How it arrived at his farm, he couldn't explain. That same year, Andreas reported to police that he'd seen someone prowling the farm at night. A stranger. The police investigated, found nothing conclusive, and the matter seemed to fade. But Andreas didn't forget. He told his family, he told people at the market. He was afraid, genuinely afraid, of something or someone he couldn't identify. Then came late March 1922. Andreas's son-in-law Joseph Lawrence was living at the farm. On March 25th, 6 days before the bodies were discovered, Joseph went to the village and did something strange. He told the local tavern keeper that he was leaving. He was frightened. He wouldn't say why. He packed his things and departed Hinterkaifeck, leaving behind his wife, Victoria, and her entire family. No one knows what Joseph knew. No record exists of him explaining his terror to anyone, but his departure created a gap, a timeline fracture that investigators would struggle with for decades. He abandoned his wife. He fled, and within days, everyone still at Hinterkaifeck was dead. On April 4th, 1922, a neighbor finally approached the farm. The animals hadn't been fed. Cows bellowed in distress. Chickens scattered across the yard. The smell, witnesses later described an unmistakable smell of death, hung over the property. When police forced their way inside, they found a scene of absolute horror. Andreas Gruber was found in his bed, his head caved in. Victoria, his wife, lay beside him, similarly bludgeoned. Their daughter Casilia and her 2 children, twins, 7 years old, were discovered in the attic, their bodies arranged almost deliberately among the straw. The blows were savage, repeated. Whoever did this didn't stop after one strike. They kept striking. The 6th victim was Casilia's mother, Victoria's mother, sometimes called the grandmother. She too bore signs of extreme violence. 6 bodies, 1 farmhouse. And in the days following the discovery, detectives found something that deepened the mystery even further. Footprints in the snow suggested the killer had walked to the farm and away from it, but the trail vanished into the forest, leading nowhere. The murder weapon was never found, and critically, there was no forced entry. Either the killer was known to the family, or they'd been let inside willingly. Or, and this possibility haunted investigators, the killer had been living at the farm all along. Suspicion fell immediately on Joseph Lawrence. He'd fled days before. He had means, strength, proximity. He had opportunity, but did he have motive? Some theorized jealousy or financial dispute. Others suggested Casilia had confided something to him before his departure, but Joseph had an alibi. Witnesses placed him in the village. The case against him crumbled. Then authorities considered the farmhand, a man named Lawrence Schlittenbauer. He'd worked at Hinterkaifeck. He had access, but like Joseph, his whereabouts seemed accounted for. The investigation stalled. Weeks turned into months. The forest kept its secrets. Some theorists have suggested a darker possibility, that one of the family members themselves committed the murders before taking their own life. Casilia's mental state before her death is unclear from historical records. Did she suffer from delusion or despair? Could she have killed her parents, her children, and the grandmother before succumbing to her own violence? It's speculative, but it remains one explanation. Others point to the unknown prowler Andreas reported, someone from outside, someone with a grudge, someone who'd been watching the farm, waiting for the moment when Joseph Lawrence's departure left the family vulnerable. But without a name, without a face, this theory remains pure speculation. What's undeniable is this: the events before the murders matter. Andreas's discovery of that newspaper, his reports of trespassing, Joseph's inexplicable terror and flight. These aren't coincidences, they are clues. They suggest that someone or something was circling Hinterkaifeck long before March 31st arrived. The Bavarian police of 1922 lacked modern forensics. DNA didn't exist. Fingerprinting was in its infancy. They relied on witnesses, footprints, and logic, and the logic led nowhere conclusive. The case remained open for decades, cycling through new theories and fresh investigators, each one hitting the same wall. Over a century has passed. The forest around Hinterkaifeck still stands. The farm itself has changed hands, been renovated, been rebuilt. But the question remains unanswered. Who walked up that forest path on that March night? Who entered that farmhouse? And what did Joseph Lawrence know that sent him fleeing into the darkness? The Hinterkaifeck murders stand as a reminder that sometimes, despite our best efforts, despite our investigations and our theories, the truth remains locked away. Not every mystery is solved. Not every killer is named. Some cases demand we sit with uncertainty, acknowledge the limits of what we can know, and respect the silence of the dead. Subscribe to dig deeper into cases like this one, where the evidence exists, but the truth remains elusive.